everyone. My name is Akka, and I'm an assistant professor at Stanford Graduate School of Business. I'm also a proud alumna of the Wharton Doctoral Program, so very happy to be here. Today, I will be talking about our project called Quantifying the Benefits of AI Recruitment, and this is joint work with my collaborator, Emir Pelikot, and for the technology and the platform, we use Micro1 AI's technology. Let me start with a very brief thought experiment. Imagine that you are a recruiter. You have a job position. You want to fill it with the absolute best candidate possible. And then you put it up, and within minutes, up until the next few days, you end up seeing applications coming in. Maybe hundreds or even thousands of applications for just one single position. As a human recruiter, how do you sort through these applications? Well, you have the information that the candidates provide, their resumes, but you don't even know what signal, what is good representation of the person, as well as how well of a fit they might be to your position. So that's the setup. That brings me to my research questions. What I'm interested to study in this project is to look at AI interviewer and see if AI can have a constructive, beneficial application into the hiring and recruitment space. So if the answer of the first question, can AI recruiters help, is yes, then as a researcher, this opens up many interesting questions for us to study. For example, we can look into mechanisms. If the answer is yes, the question is, why is this happening? What are some of the possibilities? And then also fairness related questions that come up. Who gets the most benefit out of AI recruitment process compared to the traditional recruitment process? So these are the three core questions that I'm going to examine in this particular project. Let me give you a little bit more backup and a view of the literature as well as how things work. There is this thing called recruitment bottleneck that's composed of multiple problems in different stages. Let me first tell you the biggest problem, which is what I alluded to in my opening example. It's just the numbers. There's so many applicants, so many resumes to go through, and not necessarily enough time and energy to be able to sort through them. And if you think that the resumes are good representations of people's skills and talent, that might be true for some cases, but there's also a lot of prior literature which suggests that people exaggerate or overestimate their abilities in their resumes. In fact, up to 80% of people say they've thought about it, and more than half of the people admit to doing so. So the signal there on the resumes may not necessarily be the best that we get. And then if you turn into the side of the firms, you're going to be working with recruiters who have a limited set of time to be able to review each of these interviews. With the quantity, there comes additional challenges. And with this type of a potentially rushed process for candidate interviewing, then you might be looking at some of these biases that could kick in. And here I'm talking about most of the literature that talks into the demographic characteristics and how certain candidates tend to be overlooked or underlooked based on these characteristics, as opposed to the resume scores or additional sources of information that we might have. So all of these basically contribute to a situation where we say, perhaps there's a better solution to doing this, or perhaps there are steps that we can incorporate to be able to make it a more efficient and more fair process. So what we're proposing here is an AI recruiter addition to the existing pipeline. And if you're wondering about why an AI solution, well, the number here is quite striking. 90% of employers already use some sort of AI in their recruitment process, whether it is the more traditional AI applications for resume tagging, resume sorting, reading, or some of the types of things I'm going to be talking about with AI recruiters, or even chatbots to be able to ask candidates further questions. That being said, the adoption is high. However, our academic research or the causal evidence for the effects of AI recruitment is not catching up with this adoption rate. So that's what we're interested in doing, trying to run a randomized controlled trial to be able to see, can we assess the efficacy of AI recruiters, and also see how it's changing the field in terms of some of the mechanisms, as well as some of the selections. Well, we know that it's going to help with time and money for the companies. There's no doubt on that side. But we also wanted to establish that it's picking the best candidates, or let's say the better candidates that it can from pools of thousands of potential candidates. How are these AI interviews integrated? On my slide, I'm showing you two representations of the different types of recruitment styles. On the first one, I'm showing you the traditional pipeline where it starts with a candidate applying to a job. And then there's usually a traditional resume screener that is sent back to the recruiter. And recruiters spend a lot of time trying to sort those few candidates that they would like to move on to the next stage, which is usually the hiring manager stage. And then the process continues from there. But in the AI recruiter perspective, what happens is that after a candidate applies to a job, they are asked or invited to take an AI interview with this AI recruiter. And then the recruiter from the company receives an additional report about this person's talents and skills. And they have that to be able to base off of their next decisions. And then the rest of the process, starting with the managing recruiter, it's about the same as before. So what we're trying to do is, can these AI recruiters help the actual recruiters get more information, more signal to be able to base their decisions on? The setting that we're going to rely on is from Micro One AI, an AI recruiter company. And on my screen, I'm showing you how the candidate screen looks like on my right side. When a position opens up, what the recruiter does is provides both a title as well as if they would like a description, and also a list of key characteristic skills that they're interested in. In our setting, this was a software developer job, so we had 3 coding-related skills that we wanted to test on our participants, on our candidates. And then if someone accepts taking this AI interview, they go to this website where they've completed this conversational, very structured interview that asks them about these skills, that it asks various questions to the candidates. And then at the end of the interview, almost instantaneously, both the candidate as well as the recruiter receives this report where there's feedback on the skills, how well they did. And the recruiters also get the video of the interview as well as a transcript of the interview. So there's so much more information about the candidate, specifically concentrating on the skills that they're interested in learning more about. How does our RCT, the experiment, look like? Well, we have 2 different arms. The treatment arm, as you might suspect, includes this AI recruiter interview, and then the control trial, which is going to be the exact regular pipeline that participants would otherwise go through without an AI recruiter option possible. And we have 2 different dependent variables that, as you'll see, will be pointing out to the exact same direction. But in our experiment, we have a human interview stage towards the end, where candidates are going to be either sent through the control arm or the treatment arm, but the interviewers are going to be blind to this previous journey that the participant came from. So we're going to assess whether these participants are more likely to pass an eventual human interview stage, depending on which arm they're coming from. And we also have these candidates' LinkedIn profiles. So we were able to scrape that data for 5 months between the time that they took the interview up until the time we wrote our paper, to be able to see, did these people actually get jobs there? The assumption is if the candidates are better, they're going to be more likely to have a new job on LinkedIn, assuming that they were looking for jobs in the first place. So these are the 2 dependent variables we concentrate on as our main variables. How does the whole experimental setup look like? Here's a diagram. At the beginning, we have posted our job on LinkedIn. Close to 37,000 participants or candidates applied. And we had a randomization to either the treatment or the control group. Here, it wasn't a 50-50 randomization. The reason for that is that not everyone who's assigned to an AI recruiter takes the AI interview. This takes time on the candidate's end, and they don't necessarily accept it. So we had a 70-30 split in terms of our randomization. And on the control side, which is the simpler pipeline, basically human recruiters select the set of participants that they want to move forward with in the position. And in the AI stage, everyone who submits an application receives the invitation to take the AI interview, but not all of them complete. In fact, we have a large number of participants who decline to take the AI interview. And among those who take it, we have a criteria that's determined by the hiring company to say that these are the minimum qualifications that I want from my candidate, as well as a check mark that they didn't cheat on the AI interview. Satisfying all of these conditions, they would be marked as either passing or failing the AI interview. And then basically our main dependent variable is going to be an additional stage human interview, where the recruiters here are completely blind to the pipeline that the person is coming from, and we assess records of that interview. Eventually, we also have the LinkedIn data that we map to the same participants. So that's the setup that I'm dealing with. This slide has a lot of numbers, but what I would like to convey is that if you look at the demographic variables, our randomization worked. The first few rows of this table showing that both the control and the treatment arms look very similar to each other up until the dependent variables that we care about. The human interview pass rates, the very first dependent variable we're interested in. So we had candidates from both of these arms completing the human interview, and about half of the AI interview group passed the eventual human interviews, and it was significantly less in the control pipeline. So basically, very simple demonstration to say that candidates that were originally filtered through the AI recruiter ended up becoming the better candidates based on additional human interviews. That's one piece of the evidence. More converging evidence from the LinkedIn data. What I'm showing you in my slide on my right side is going to be across the different months, the likelihood that the candidate indicates on their own LinkedIn profile that they have a new job. And it looks like the participants that AI recruited or AI vetted for said were good candidates tended to have a higher probability of finding a new job based on their LinkedIn profile as well. Okay, so this brings me to my next research question. Why is this the case? What could be some of the mechanisms based on the data that we have available in our experiment that we can study, pointing at the reasons why AI recruiter might be working in identifying who are the better candidates? The first mechanism we study is self-selection. Originally, I mentioned that we didn't have an even 50-50 split for the number of participants randomized for control versus the treatment arms, and that's exactly what I'm talking about here too. Only 1 out of the 4 invited candidates ended up opting in to complete the AI interview. So even that basically ended up becoming a potential signal, a mechanism for us to study. And if we look at who dropped out, so we have the candidate resumes from everyone, so we can look at the demographic characteristics for those who opted in to take the interview versus those who did not. It turns out that participants who were older, participants who were more experienced and more educated, decided not to take the AI recruitment interview compared to those who did not show these characteristics. That being said, when we look at the resumes they have submitted, there was no strong association between who dropped out versus who were the better candidates based on their resume qualities. So at the very first phase, it looks like as a mechanism, those who select to go through this AI recruitment process is providing us with some information for the types of candidates who might be interested in taking these interviews, yet it doesn't correlate highly with who they are in terms of the qualities. What else? In my literature review, I pointed out the finding that most people or some people exaggerate what is written on their resumes. We can also, for the skills that our AI recruiter tested, we can also look at how people wrote about them in their resumes and basically identify if there are any discrepancies between what they self-reported versus how the AI characterized their skill. In this particular experiment and role, there were 3 specific coding skills like Python. So we were able to only look at those 3 and assess how likely is the resume accurately describing their skills. And we see that a share of our candidates seem to overestimate or misrepresent their own abilities while they're reporting in their resumes. And I'd like to say that this is probably a conservative estimate with the way we're computing these things. But one benefit of an AI recruiter is basically not just relying on the resume information, but providing additional information about the candidate's capabilities. What else? We got asked a lot about how are these interviews comparing relative to the humans doing interviews, and that's a very interesting question. But at the time, our first big experiment did not have the recording of the final stage interviews, so we used archival data, and we looked at recorded AI versus human interviews and coded for things like technical quality, as well as conversational flow and just consistency with just the variance between these scores. And what we find is technical quality tends to be rated higher in the AI interviews. And similarly, as you might expect, these structured conversational AI interviews are also flowing nicely based on these ratings. And there's more consistency, less variance in the AI interviewers from the same AI recruiter to the other AI recruiter versus a human recruiter 1 versus 2. So AI recruiter tends to score higher on technical quality, conversational flow, and consistency. So just another piece of evidence for that. The last question we looked at is going to be who benefits from these AI interviews. And then there's many things that we could do. I'm seeing my Q&A nod. So let me summarize the main finding from this piece of analysis. What we see is that AI recruiter favored a pattern of participants who tend to be younger, less experienced, and earlier in their careers. And this is potentially a very important finding because it seems like it's shifting distribution of those candidates who might be suggested to pass on to the next phase. It's almost like the consideration set is changing based on whether someone comes from the traditional recruitment pipeline versus the AI interviews. With that, I am looking at some benefits and some trade-offs of AI interviews. Both of these things exist in these settings. In terms of the benefits, we see the dependent variables showing up, higher pass rates, less recruiter time, and then if there's a resume inflation for those skills that people have tested, they are easier to catch, and then it seems to benefit younger talent. But in terms of the trade-offs, you have an additional step. You have the additional AI recruiter interview where not everyone opts in to do it, so there's more effort on the candidate side, and you might see some people dropping out of it, so not even starting the application process. And we've tested this with a software role, but future research could also look at different types of recruitment processes. With that, just to sum up, we have seen benefits with improved recruitment outcomes in terms of pass rates and LinkedIn data. And I would like to say that we didn't replace the recruiter in a way, but we gave them additional reports, additional sources of information or signal to be able to allow them to make their decisions with more data, more information. And then I've shown you self-selection, skill verification, and the interview consistency as 3 mechanisms we test and see evidence for. And also we can study questions like who benefits most versus who doesn't seem to have a change in the recruitment pool in terms of demographics. With that, I will stop here and take any questions that you may have for me. Thank you.